Hey everyone. I've come across an interesting video. Well, I find it interesting. I watched it the whole way through. It was 41 minutes, but I watched it the whole way through. And it was a street preacher, and he was in Hull, and he was doing what he does, preaching the word of God. So I watched this whole thing, and it's nothing really unexpected. Nothing new. But what was intriguing is the interaction between the street preacher and mostly young people in Hull city centre. And then the end of the video, he went to Hull College and continued there. He was having some technical issues with his phone. He may see this video, and if he does, well, this is my take. Um, I've come across street preachers a few times. I came across a guy in Sunderland. In fact, I have a suspicion it might be the same guy because I've seen another video of him speaking in Leeds, and I think it's the same guy. Youngish guy, I'm guessing late 30s, early 40s, don't know. But he's got an Northeast accent. He'll know himself if he's been to Sunderland. Anyway, um, I always feel a little bit mixed feelings about street preachers, but I'll come to that in a minute. Just give my own background briefly first. Um, my own background, I come from a Christian family, right? I was baptized. I certainly as a child and as a teenager, I went to church. Um, I was never devoutly religious, but I did go to church. I came from that background. Um, I don't think I could ever be an atheist because I don't have um, something I've given a lot of thought to because these issues are profound. And I just don't think I could ever be settled with the idea that there is simply nothing, which ultimately is the atheist viewpoint. Atheists can get defensive about that, but that's fundamentally what it is. That you believe all religions are superstition, they're fairy tales, there's nothing there, and just science. Um, I don't share this idea that it's either religion or science. That's why I always find Christians who are also interested in science or scientists who have come from a Christian background interesting because it's sort of defying this idea that you have to be one or the other. I don't see any reason why you can't believe in matter and atoms and galaxies and even the Big Bang Theory, not the TV show, the theory, and also believe in God. It's a subject I'm very interested in, the overlap there. Um, just for the record, I think the New Earth people are deluded. I think their argument is deluded, that is, that the world is only 6,000 years old because they're just stubbornly ignoring facts. Facts established by, extensive geological research, for example. The world is not 6,000 years old. That is just ludicrous. I think even most Christians wouldn't believe that. Um, so that's my background. I'm not an atheist. I'm not coming from an atheist point of view, nor am I particularly religious. I don't go to church except on special occasions like Christmas. Um, and I do have a problem with some of the dogmatic lifestyle, things like no sex before marriage and sort of living your entire life through the scriptures. I That doesn't sit entirely comfortably with me because I think there's a contradiction between freedom of conscience and tying yourself to the sort of for want of a better term, biblical dogma. I mean, it's not something that I'm prepared to do. Where does morality come from? Well, this is an interesting thing. I saw Douglas Murray had a take on this, the commentator and the writer. He said something along the lines of it's categorically absurd to suggest that morality doesn't come from faith. I saw this little segment where he was talking about faith. I think he's a lapsed Christian. I'm not. I'd need to check that out again. I can't remember. But um, atheists say, well, morality simply comes from being a decent person. Don't hurt people, don't be cruel, don't be unpleasant, don't steal, don't murder, and so on. Um, but it's undeniable, especially in this country, that we have a long history and a long basis in Judeo-Christian principles, and morality comes from that. Now, the go-to the atheists always have, and I'm just kind of covering this briefly before getting into the thing about street preachers, their go-to is always to point out the extreme things that Christianity done, such as burning women at the stake as alleged witches. I was in Newcastle yesterday, and in the castle keep, there was a segment on 15 people, 14 women and a man who were executed in 1649 during witch trials. So atheists always point this out, the bloody history of the church, and who can deny that? And I would defy any preacher, incidentally, to deny that. The church has a very bloody history. Islam unquestionably has a bloody history. Still does, I would argue. Um, Look at the abuse that has happened under the church. I mean, I would put this to street preachers. If you're saying it's all, live life through the word of God, they might say, well, that's that man's fault. That's the church. And often I find that they tend to be independent from, for example, Anglicanism or the Roman Catholic Church. They tend to be more independent, evangelical. Well, they're not even really part of any denominations, from what I gather. So they would say, well, that's the Anglican Church, that's the Roman Catholic Church. But nevertheless, that is society's image of the church. It's been heavily damaged in Canada, for example. Um, I think, if someone's proselytizing, they have to be honest about that, that the church has a negative reputation in many ways. So, you can point out all the good things the church does in terms of helping the homeless, the Salvation Army and numerous Christian charities. Very often it is Christians who are on the front line of this stuff, of humanitarian work. And, other faith groups as well. You have the Red Crescent in Islam. So there's that side of it. But I think people of faith need to acknowledge, for example, the child sexual abuse in the church. If you want to proselytize, you need to acknowledge that. That's a point worth bearing in mind. But atheists, when they say that morality just comes from decency, I think that gets into an interesting question. Does it really? Well, where does the sense of decency come from? Is this something that's just evolved over time? Because of empathy, because we want to be treated fairly. Where does it come from? Now, to get into the point about actual street preaching, well, specifically about this video, I'll sort of focus a little bit on that. A big part of the preaching was about the issue of LGBT people and abortion, and there were some teenagers in the. This was a public square in Hull City Centre, and it got a little bit testy. No violence, but there was a woman who called herself a witch, and she was, there was a bit of verbal exchanges going on. On the issue of abortion, something was interesting. There was a 16-year-old girl that basically had this very flippant attitude to it. Now, I'm not anti-abortion. I think there are circumstances where it's necessary for the health of the woman in cases of rape and incest. However, on that issue, I'm uncomfortable with late-stage abortion. That is, shortly before the period of birth, when the organs are largely developed. I'm not comfortable with abortion at that stage. And another thing that annoys me about this issue a little bit is opponents of abortion are smeared as misogynist woman haters. I think that's a bit absurd. Yes, there are extremists who will, harass women outside abortion clinics and in extreme cases even murder abortion doctors. I think what's going on in Texas is, abhorrent. I think that goes way too far. However, I think when it comes to this debate, it's forgotten that people who are against abortion, they don't hate women, they just don't agree with killing the fetus as they see it, or they would see it as killing babies. Um, if people who are pro-abortion don't like the concept of baby killing, then they have to accept that smearing people as misogynist is also a lazy argument. The truth is, this is a complex subject, and I, like a lot of people, I wouldn't say I'm smack bang in the middle. I'm more probably pro-choice, but I'm not comfortable with late-stage abortion. Now, anyway, when he brought this issue up, this young woman, teenager, she was basically demonstrating a problem that is in our society, which is just, well, I've got no responsibility, so what? If you look at the video, you'll see I'll put a link to this, just so you could see the context. Um, LGBT issues, I think, the assumption is, well, it's a lifestyle choice, but um, and he was saying you don't know what homophobia means. Does it mean the fear of gay people? But I don't dislike gay people. Here's the problem that street preachers don't get. They can say that they are just doing it for the public good. You're trying to save people, but in the end of the day, there's optics here. If you're standing in a city centre and you're telling everyone they're sinners, that may be your honest conviction, but no one's going to thank you for it. They're going to see you as very, very self righteous. They're going to see you as looking down on them. I mean, put yourself in the public shoes. If someone was to judge you and, look down on you in that way, you wouldn't react well. So they might say it's because they love people that they're trying to help them, and it's simply the word of God. But I question, is it the best approach? This is my issue with street preaching. Is it the best approach? Because if the whole point is to proselytize, to try and get people to see the light, the vast majority of people are cynical. It's one of two things. Either people get angry, as was the case in this video from Hull, where you had some, particularly young people, getting quite hostile and quite, some of them were laughing, some of them were quite worked up by it. So that's one approach. The other approach is people just think you're, I'm sorry, but they think you're nuts. They think you're a religious fanatic. So I question, in terms of practicality, what does this proselytizing do? Now, I know the guy in the video said that two women, he didn't want to name them, but they'd responded positively. Okay, let's say those two women sort of found the light and they become devout Christians. Well, what about the hundreds who react cynically? Are you saying that, oh, well, it's worth it if we just get one or two? I just question that as a strategy. Um, and I think that they need to accept that the way they talk to people, calling people sinners, you're never going to get people that way. It's like any other sort of public demonstration. It's like the Insulate Britain crowd. Well, it's not the same thing actually, but when you're delivering a message, you have to be practical about it. So the Insulate Britain crowd, they think that by blocking roads, they're going to get the public to be as angry as they are about climate change and about insulation. But all that happens is the public get infuriated with them. Now, street preachers aren't really the same thing because I will say this, I support the right to do it. They might be irritating. People might even say they're homophobic and bigoted. But ultimately, if they're in a public area, they are ultimately just expressing their freedom of conscience. And I said at the start of the video of mixed feelings. I sort of have some degree of respect for people who are willing to take abuse for their freedom of conscience, for to stand up for their conviction, as long as they're not breaking the law or hurting other people. Now, if you're gay and you're walking through a city centre and you hear a street preacher telling the public that, homosexuality is a sin and you'll burn in hell, obviously that's going to make someone very uncomfortable. It will look like spreading hatred. And street preachers might say, no, no, we're trying to save them. We're doing a humane thing for them. But firstly, it's not a lifestyle choice. A close friend of mine is gay. Now, he didn't just one day decide, oh, it's a fashion trend, I'll just be gay. This sounds interesting. He always felt that way. Gay conversion therapy is deeply controversial for a reason. And it's rightly legal in many jurisdictions. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. But I think they've got a right to do it because it's a public space, freedom of conscience. They're not breaking any laws. I mean, they're not making any threats or anything like that. I would say to street preachers, you come across as very self righteous. And you could say it's not you, it's the word of God, but you are the messenger. And I just question how effective a method it is. Would it not be better, for example, to maybe set up a Christian charity, work with the homeless, work with vulnerable people, not to proselytize, but to simply show faith in action? Not to say, well, I'll give you food if you become a Christian, but simply be a good Christian in that sense. I mean, I wonder, would that be more effective? I think Britain, this country has a rich Christian tradition. So anyone that says that Christianity is irrelevant in terms of our history, they're totally ignorant. But I do wonder about this approach because I think people will naturally respond in a hostile way if they think that you're talking down to them, which is how it comes across. But I'm willing to have a civil conversation about something like this. Maybe one of these street preachers will come across this video, maybe not. But that's my thoughts on it. I'm speaking not of as an atheist. I believe in something, but I just wonder, is this the best approach? And I wonder, the street preachers, after a long day of getting, verbal abuse, do they really, really think that it is the best approach? Maybe they would argue it's the only approach. I mean, they might say that Christ himself proselytized in this way, but um, I think you have to be practical in the modern world. And I just don't think that this is the most practical approach. But I might be wrong. Maybe some of these street preachers get a lot of positive responses. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts.